大家好，欢迎来到瑞视频，我是 Jennifer。美国和中国近期达成了为期90天的贸易关税协议。现在我们邀请南加大法学院的教授 Brian Peck 先生，那他也是国际贸易方面的研究专家，从他的角度呢来解读一下这一关税协议呢对美国和中国意味着什么。
Well, I think it's a positive development. I mean, I think although it's a small step, I think it's an important one because it's the first step in the process of de-escalating the trade tensions between the two countries,
嗯
and hopefully will allow some cooling off period to try to have some substantive negotiations to resolve the issues and stop the trade war from escalating further.
How do you think about the challenge between US and China?
I think what's come out of this current dispute between the two countries with regards to the tariffs that in the escalation of tariffs until the most recent agreement was that both countries I think really realized how important the trade relationship is between the two countries. I mean, we're the two largest economies in the world, and I think both realized the negative impact it would have on each other's economy if the trade war continues for a longer period of time.
Do you think which kind of business will benefit from these agreements?
Well, obviously, companies that import components and parts or products from China, will benefit. Although, again, the current agreement is only for 90 days, so hopefully they'll negotiate a longer term reduction of tariffs. But I think logistics companies will benefit because companies are still uncertain about what will happen after 90 days. And so companies will rush to import as much as possible, I think, to take advantage of the lower tariff. Instead of 145%, of course, now it's 30%, which is still significant, but a lot less than 145%. So I think, as I say, the ports, the logistic companies, companies involved in the transportation of imports from China will benefit. I think our exporters will benefit. Obviously, the Chinese market was, now being reduced to 10% rather than over 100% it was before with the trade war. So I think, the majority of companies that do engage in trade, either, from China's side or U.S. side, will benefit. Although, again, how long it will last, we don't know yet.
We already see some products, between China and the US here. Already, the price of the products raised a lot. So, do you think this agreement will, give us some break of this inflation or something like that?
It'll give a break, but again, the risk is that it might be short term. Again, because it's only, technically for 90 days. And we don't know what's going to happen, whether the negotiations will be successful in permanently reducing the tariffs, in reaching a longer-term trade agreement that will grant greater certainty for U.S. and Chinese businesses. That's the hope, but we just at this point have to keep our fingers crossed that some sort of longer-term agreement can be reached over these 90 days while we have a cooling off period.
Uh-huh.
And in the meantime, as you said, you've seen prices rise. I think also there's still a risk because of the tariffs were at such so high at 145%, and they were in place for several weeks. I think we still might see in the next 90 days some higher prices and some shortages as well, because it takes because of the lag time to get products back over from China back into the United States.
President Trump hoped to bring back the manufacturer back to the United States. Do you think his tariff policy gonna be work for this?
I think it's difficult to understand because the Trump administration has stated different prior objectives of tariffs. One is to, as you say, is to bring back manufacturing jobs to the United States by making it more difficult to bring imports into the United States. But he's also said in the past that he want to use tariffs to raise revenue and then also to use as leverage for bargaining with other trading partners, including China. So they're a little bit contradictory because in one sense, if you want to bring revenue in, and if indeed it creates more jobs and manufacturing capacity in the United States, that means there's going to be less imports, which means less tariffs, means less revenue. So to me, the objectives are a little bit contradictory. If they keep the tariffs high and it will force a certain amount of manufacturing to return to the United States. But the other challenge is that certain products, there's no U.S. manufacturing base existing, that it would take years to build up the manufacturing capacity to replace the imports of certain products and services. There are other types of products that the U.S. just doesn't have the capacity to produce. For example, coffee. We obviously import a lot of coffee. We have a lot of coffee drinkers in the United States,
Mhm.
and the U.S. just doesn't have the climate, suitable to grow large amounts of coffee in the United States. So there's certain products. I'm just using that as an example, but there are certain products that either will take years to develop a manufacturing base in the United States, or the U.S. just doesn't have the capacity to do so. So, that strategy of using tariffs to bring manufacturing, I think, has a limited application, but I think, again, it runs contradictory to some of the other objectives of the tariff policy, and in some cases will not be feasible or possible for years to come.
From the long run, do you think this President Trump's tariff policy gonna affect the other section of U.S. like education?
Well, I think it definitely has a negative impact on U.S. Relationships with other countries and trading partners. Beyond trade, whether it's exchange of culture or students or education, whether it's geopolitical alliances. I think, the tariff policy in itself would have, if it's in place for a long term, would have, a high likelihood of negative impact on other aspects of relationships, bilateral relationships that the U.S. has with its trading partners.
Okay. From your study, what do you think like the investor and also the entrepreneurs, they are expecting in the future of this situation?
Well, that's the difficulty. I think, although there was certainly uncertainty before with the high tariffs and how long they were going to last. As I say, we've got a 90-day period to try to reach a longer term agreement, and no one knows, what will happen. I mean, hopefully it will result in a longer term agreement that will reduce tariffs on a more permanent basis without the uncertainty of tariffs being increased again. But there's also the likelihood that if the talks aren't successful over these 90 days, that the U.S. will again increase the tariffs back up to another 145% or whatever level they decide to do. So I think right now it's still kind of everyone is in, entrepreneurs and U.S. businesses, and even for Chinese exporters, I think and U.S. exporters as well, there's still a higher level of uncertainty and kind of in a holding pattern right now to get better idea what's going to come out of these 90 days of negotiations for hopefully a longer term solution that will grant greater certainty to U.S. exporters and Chinese exporters and U.S. businesses, Chinese businesses that rely on U.S.-China trade to be able to make business decisions and investment decisions again.
Okay.
But for now, I think it's on a holding pattern.
Okay. So yeah, I heard many people said that they almost no transportation from the port to the U.S. and there are no ships, cargo ships recently. So do you think this is going to be better, or it's going to last a long time?
Well, again, a lot of it just depends on the next 90 days and what kind of resulting agreement between the two countries takes place. As I say, until we have a better idea what direction it's going, it's difficult for businesses and companies involved in trade between U.S. and China to make any long-term plans because there's no certainty of whether the tariffs will go back up, whether they'll stay down. It's just too uncertain at this point to make any sort of longer-term decisions, which is not good for business because businesses that invest in their trading enterprises need to have a certain amount of certainty to make longer-term investment decisions in their business, whether it's hiring more people, whether it's expanding manufacturing capacity, whether it's importing more goods or exporting more goods. It all depends on certainty, and without that certainty, it's more difficult to run your business. I think, again, what this trade war has highlighted is the basic fact that the two economies, depend on each other. They're so integrated in terms of supply chain, in terms of export and import markets and trans-Pacific trade, that they're both vital for each other's economy and economic growth. And for the U.S. side, obviously the trade war has this negative impact on U.S. consumer prices and on shortages of goods. For the China side, they were facing unemployment increases because of Chinese exporters losing business to the U.S. market. So I think the one positive silver lining of the trade war is a greater recognition of the importance of each other's economy to each other's economic growth and development, and the need to have a more stable, longer-term trade relationship is key and vital to the economic success of both countries.
Especially from California point of view, I know that the governor said he gonna do his efforts to break this tariff wall. So do you think California gonna be very special from this kind of situation, the relationship?
Well, I think California has a very special relationship with China. Not only with Governor Newsom, but previous administration with Governor Brown. They have several memorandums of understanding for trade and investment, for cooperation in climate change, in clean energy and other areas. And of course, California's agricultural business has a huge stake in China being one of its largest export markets. So there is a special relationship that exists.
Mm-hmm.
As a state, we cannot do much in terms of federal trade policy, in terms of tariffs and stuff like that. But the state can certainly continue to work on a subnational level, in areas of possible areas of collaboration and cooperation. And of course, the governor, as he mentioned in the past, would seek cooperation from our trading partners, including China, to exempt California exports from the higher tariffs. That, of course, is up again to the national governments of China and other countries. But California certainly will make an effort to maintain its close relationships with its trading partners, including China.
Thank you,
All right,
Brian.
take
Bye-bye.
care. Have a nice weekend.